Obey me. Obey. Big Finish. We love stories.
Hello YouTube, I'm welcome to another Doctor Who Big Finish review. Today I'm finally taking a look at something that I've had my eye on for a few months actually, so I'm glad that it's finally been released, and it's the Doctor Who monthly range Master Trilogy. Now this has just been opened this month with And You Will Obey Me, the 5th Doctor story with Geoffrey Beevers as the Master, and it is actually a very exciting idea because it's a part of the monthly range in case you are unaware of what it is, and not a few people were quite confused about it. Basically the monthly range comes out every month no matter what. Basically what they've decided to do at Big Finish is have 3 whole episodes, including the April release, May release and June release, to be a Masters Trilogy story thing, and basically it's a massive setup idea, and we're sort of going away from what the monthly range tends to focus on, and that is brand new stories, as that's what I sort of like about the monthly range, as it is literally something brand new. I've not actually listened to a monthly range story yet that actually consists of a villain that we've already seen in the show, I don't think. It is just generally whole new ideas. So this time we're going back to the monthly range, actually stripping all the way back to the actual series itself, which is something quite rare for Big Finish to do, actually, come to think of it, and take a look at the Doctor with the Master in a new Master story. And I'm very excited for it because I've not really seen much of the Master on Big Finish, and this is sort of the perfect way to do it. So first off, a massive spoiler warning for any Jago and Lightfoot fans, which if you are unaware of them, please go and skip like 20 seconds because I will ruin the end of Series 10 for you. Basically, this Master Trilogy technically opened at the end of Jago and Lightfoot Series 10, as the cliffhanger for that series was the reveal of the Master, and yeah, that was a very shocking moment. If you want to hear more of my thoughts about Jago and Lightfoot Series 10, go and check out the review, and Series 11 is coming out very, very soon, and I'm very hyped for it. I don't in fact know if it really hooks in with Jago and Lightfoot Series 11 that much, of course, because it isn't out yet, but yeah, I believe it probably will in somewhere. This episode also contains Geoffrey Beevers, much like how Jago and Lightfoot does, so I'm very excited to see what they do with that in the future. This release contains the same format for any other monthly range release. It is a 2-hour story split across 4 parts, much like the 5th Doctor era in general, really, and yeah, it is an episode that I think that if you go by the cover, you will be a little bit misled, and I know a few people weren't really too happy with overall how the story happened, really. Personally, I don't really see what some of the issues were. I did really enjoy it. I think that they took the Master down a different route, which is what I loved. I think that the problem with the Master is, in the actual show, he's very much a cackling villain, because he comes on, and even the music in the 1970s basically represented stereotypical villain. And yeah, I do agree with that. I like that they keep that into the theme, but this episode took it down a whole new route. Now, if you're looking for a story that is completely Master-based, this is not one for you. Going straight off, the Master isn't in it as much as you may expect. Although you go by the cover, much more, it's more of a plot that focuses around the Master when he's not actually there. And I think it is a very creepy story. Much like last week when I reviewed Nightshade, that was also a very creepy story, which we tend to be going on a bit of a theme at the moment with Big Finish. But yeah, this release is something different, which I always like to say that because I don't like the idea of recycled plots. That is one of my main things that I hate. This, on Big Finish, is something completely new, and the first thing you actually see for the story is an auction room where the 5th Doctor is going to bid on this clock, and basically there's this massive bidding war around the sentimentality of this clock, which of course is the Master's TARDIS. It then ends up getting bought over the phone by these people, as what I was unaware of. I thought it would have been in the 1980s or something to start with. Turns out not, it's actually a 2016 based story. What gets sold to these people that we then later find out in the story, and very early on we're introduced to these characters called Helen and Colin, some teenagers, which I wasn't fully aware of to start with. I thought they were more adults, but yeah, it turns out they're teenagers, and what basically, I'm just going to go straight into it, in case you don't want it to be spoiled, click off the review. But yeah, basically, these kids have been under the control of the Master for many, many years, and I'm just going to go and jump ahead a few episodes, because I find it easier to do for this episode, because it's very back to front. Basically, these children got kidnapped, technically, by the Master in the 1980s when his TARDIS crash-landed in a barn, which is where the front cover comes from. And basically, the Master hypnotises them using the Obey Me powers. That's why it's sort of called And You Will Obey Me. And yeah, he's basically got these children, and he's sort of using them not necessarily as slaves, but he's getting them to do things in order to fix his TARDIS and him. First off, the teenagers want to take him to sort of the local NHS area. I don't know what that would be, but yeah, sort of in the village, a doctor or something, ironically. And yeah, he doesn't want to go, of course, so he hypnotizes them, and basically they do everything for him, including stealing parts for the TARDIS, things like that. And it is a very creepy idea. I think that Jeffrey Beavers, for a start, I adore him as the Master. I think that he's brilliant. Honestly, his voice is just, it's something different. It is evil. And I just think that he definitely brings a brilliant atmosphere to being the Master. And I can't wait to see him in the Two Masters story coming in 2 months' time with the 7th Doctor. We are then introduced to a character called Annie, which the 5th Doctor meets in this pub area outside where they're wanting to buy the clock. And basically she takes him to this little house on the outskirts of this village, and there was this person who lived there called Masterton. Going a bit down the Yardville route here from the last adventure, but yeah, we have a guy called Masterton. Basically, the Doctor then decides to go to his house and dig up the grave of where it would be. There's nobody in there. And yeah, first off, we're very shocked at that to start with, and we have a few more developments in the house. We then go away from there, and we learn about how Annie actually has the key to the TARDIS. So then the Doctor basically wants to track down the TARDIS because there's been this distress signal, which we then later find out has been set off because the TARDIS has been tampered with. Because if you have a TARDIS, it would just send out a distress signal for no reason. It's actually been infiltrated by somebody, and that is how mainly the story started at the very end, and it sort of did this confusing loop, I guess. The 5th Doctor was brilliant for this story, actually. Personally, in the actual show itself, I've never been too much of a fan of the 5th Doctor or his era. I think that it's a little bit iffy in places. I still think he's a good Doctor, much like any Doctor. I love every single Doctor because they all have something brilliant to them and they all have something new there. I never don't like a Doctor because I think that's just wrong. But yeah, the 5th Doctor, I love him on Big Finish. I've had a bit of a 5th Doctor rampage recently with the, obviously, of course, the monthly range that's been released, including Aquatine, Waters of Amsterdam, recently the Peterloo Massacre as well, which that is a good story. I may get around to reviewing that at some point soon, fingers crossed, even though that was the last one, but still we'll get round to it hopefully. But yeah, that's a very good release in case you are unaware. That is very good too. And this one, we have the 5th Doctor again. This sort of technically ends the 5th Doctor loop that we've got a bit at the moment. Then he comes back probably near the end of this year. But I must say, really enjoyed him in this. I think that the 5th Doctor is very, he's sort of a bit more new series, I think. Which, when I say new series, I think he has a lot more characteristics to the new series Doctors, and I enjoy him in it. I think that he worked very, very well. He's a bit different to the other Doctors. He's a lot calmer, he gets a lot more confused, and there was generally points where I honestly felt that he's going to die. Even though he doesn't, obviously, because the Caves of Androzani happens and then the amazing Colin Baker comes after. But hey, we can't forget that, you know. But I do genuinely feel at points that he is under threat and he's going to die. Because I think that genuinely he's quite an innocent Doctor. And he's quite sad. And, you know, he feels a little bit weak, really. But very, very intelligent. Later on in the story, the Doctor's held at gunpoint because why not? Basically, these massive dragon assassins come out of nowhere. They're basically a bit like the Wirren, I guess. That's the best way that I imaged them in my mind. So this is another second episode in the row where we've had a giant fly creature. So yeah, Big Finish like giant fly creatures at the moment. But yeah, they are interesting. I think the voices for them were a little bit off-putting, I will be honest. I think the assassins were okay. Once again, the assassins were in fact played by the same person who played Helen. Assassins were tracking down the Master, and then later on in the story, we then find out that Annie is in fact not working for MI5, and she is also an android, and I do believe, what do they call her in my notes? Transhuman assassin, where she's basically this voice-manipulated robot that is also trying to track down the Master, and they are all based around money, and basically they have a price of, I think it was 3,000 universal credits on the Master's head, and what they were going to do with that money once they get it is donate it to charity. So yeah, we've sort of got the intergalactic Oxfam that just so happens to kill people. I think that's an interesting plot, you know, but they don't want the money for themselves, they want to donate it to charity, so I guess sort of they're a bit harmless, but they do want to kill people at the same time. So yeah, I do think that once we get these interesting ideas in there, that basically we've got the Master, not many people like him, they all want to kill him, the Doctor's thrown in there, and also saw the children that the Master manipulated, and because he manipulated them, and he put his self-conscious in the TARDIS, technically he's still alive, so he can control the kids. That's where it gets a bit confusing. Running the story, we find out that the Master is physically trapped inside the TARDIS, as I said, in the subconscious of the TARDIS. And yeah, I love the use of the screen because the Doctor and the rest of them go in, they turn on the screen and he is in there. And yeah, I think that he's very eerie, and the way that he calls Mikey his child still. And I love the quote because in the story he says that they are the children that he never had. I believe he sort of says it in a sort of quite a grumpy voice of them. You're the children I never had, or something like that. And I just at that point I honestly felt a bit not sorry for him, but I think that he's had, well, I'm just gonna say I think he's had a bit of a troubled past, but I think we can sort of establish that already. See, I think what we get to see in this story is the Master's a little bit lonely, really. I can't really see him settling down with somebody, because let's face it, he's not really much of a looker, is he? I can't really see him, I think that it's one of those episodes that you feel, I did anyway, but I'm a bit weird. I generally did feel a bit of sympathy for the Master, because I think that's the problem with other Masters. They don't have the emotion in there, and I think that sometimes the best villains work when you hate them, but you also feel sorry for them at the same time. That's what Jeffrey Beavers does, because he's brilliant at the Master's voice and very, very eerie. I think that once again, he's much like Christopher Benjamin and Trevor Baxter, and Colin in that matter actually, that his voice works so much on Big Finish, and I honestly think that some doctors, like Colin, maybe even Paul McGann, they just generally work more on Big Finish because of the voice. I think their voices are generally more suited to the audio aspect, and I think that's what's brilliant about this story and Jeffrey Beavers. The ending of part 2 and the majority of part 3 do get a bit confusing, much like last time when I reviewed Nightshade once again. I think that with that episode being split into a more 2-part story, there was a lot more leeway in there, but because this one is physically divided up into a 4-part story, much like how the majority of Peter Davison's stories are, there was a bit of toing and froing in places. We had the Doctor with the dragonfly nymphs, which wanted to go places and things like that and try and track down the Master. There was the helicopter stuff with the Russians, and yeah, I did feel that it was a bit, oh, we go here, then we go here, oh, now this, now we're introducing these people, here's Janine, there's a few things like that, and I did genuinely feel myself getting a bit confused in places, much like how I did last time, but I think that Alan Barnes sort of manages to keep it undertone. I think that this episode could have very easily, if it was a new series story, which plot could very easily just think it's too brilliant. Basically, we've got a very egotistical plot, I think, and it could have very easily been very egotistical and made itself sound absolutely brilliant. But I think that it's toned back, and I think that the straws have been drawn in here, and it's sort of got a bit of a layer on, and I think that it sort of stopped at one point going, no, that's that now, we're not going to draw it any further. And that's what sort of works. I think that this episode is one of those ones, if it was thought out a little bit more, maybe a few things could have been removed, but if it was overthought, it could have just messed the story up completely. So I think that this episode has a fine line between being a bit too complicated and just being too big for its boots, and I think that that line is sort of just in the middle. But as I said previously, the Master I do for the story, I love Jeffrey Beavers in it. He's a few people, I read a few reviews previous actually, I read a few on some sites, and I'm looking forward to see what DWM say about it, to be honest. Which, yeah, I heard a few bad things about it. And honestly, the majority of the reviews that I read made out that the Master was literally only in it for a few minutes. Like, literally 2 or so minutes, like a cameo, like Jago and Lightfoot. Which, yeah, I got a bit worried at that point, considering he was on the cover. But to me, I felt like that he was sort of in it not too much. He wasn't in it like a normal Master story, like a Third Doctor one, for example. He wasn't in it from the very beginning at all. I would say the first time that we actually heard his voice was probably near the end of part 2. But one of the episodes is solely based in the past when they go back to the 1980s, and that's after the toing and throwing. So in fact, I think that episode 2 is the one that goes a bit to and fro all over the place. Episode 3 really settles down and has this idea of them going back in time for a while, and we have the idea of the children plot, and I really enjoyed that. I think that 10 minutes worth of cut of having the Master in there really worked, and it really gave some background to the story, and yeah, I just felt that he was in it for a good amount. I may have expected more if I was only given the cover of, right, this is a Master story, we have the TARDIS within the clock thing there, and it looked a very Master idea of story, very Master focused, especially the title being And You Will Obey Me, but in fact it's quite relevant because the title is rather like hypnosis, much like the kids were for the majority of the story. And yeah, I think the title was relevant, and I think the majority of the Master in it was relevant as well. And it's not like we're getting a missed opportunity with Jeffrey Beavers not being in it as much, because we essentially have him, as I said, coming up in the 2 Masters in May, and we also have him in every single episode of Jago and Lightfoot Series 11, which I will mention that again because I'm really excited for it. That's that really. I'm going to leave you to find out the rest of this story, as I will leave in the description below the link to buy this story from the official Big Finish website. Now it's $14.99, which once again, any monthly range story, only £14, and with that you also get the download version that you can put onto your phones and things if you have an Apple, iTunes, whatever. I don't, but yeah, you can listen to it on download or the CD. How perfect's that? It's really quite a solid start actually to the Master Trilogy, and I'm very excited to see where they go next with it. And that's that for the monthly range this month. Next month we have Vampires of the Mind, which I'm very excited for because we have Colin Baker as the amazing Sixth Doctor, we have Alex McQueen as the amazing Dark Eyes Master, don't know how that's working, and we have another Master story coming up, so I guess I will see you then. Thanks for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, please do give it a big like and please subscribe if you're not already. If you have any questions, please do leave them below and I'll be sure to answer them at some point in the near future. Thanks again for watching. I shall see you all next time. So thanks for watching and bye for now.